be the first to admit that 2024 wasn't as good of a year as 2023 when it came to the amount of good quality horror games that we got. With that being said, there were some pretty amazing remakes, indie horror, and original IPs that definitely made their mark on the horror genre that released in 2024. But that's a different topic for a different video. Today we are looking to the future once again, as 2025 looks to be a pretty stacked year for horror games. This time, it seems like we could get our fill of just about every single horror subgenre out there. Whether that's in the form of classic survival horror games, first-person horror simulators, or sequels to beloved franchises, 2025 looks to have something for everyone. And on this episode of Nerdspace Games, I'll be diving into the top 20 horror games that I'm most excited about. For the record, I'll only be focusing on horror games that have been confirmed and have a chance of showing up at some point in 2025. So, as much as it kills me to say this, I won't be including Resident Evil 9 on today's list. I know, heartbreaking. Before we get started though, if you haven't already, please consider subscribing to the channel for more survival horror content. Also, hit that like button if you enjoyed today's topic. Anyway, my name is Ruben with Nerdspace Games, and this is my top 10 best upcoming horror games of 2025. Let's get it. Number 20, The Occultist. The Occultist is a first-person horror game that follows Alan Rebel, a paranormal investigator that travels to the abandoned island of Godstone in search of his missing father. Since the island was abandoned in the 50s, it has become a hotspot for dark spirits that were tortured and killed by a cult that performed disturbing experiments and horrifying sacrifices on the victims that took up residence on this small island. The game looks to explore the ability of using a mythical object to see horrifying ghosts and use Alan's abilities with the occult to fight off these spirits, find his father, and unravel the dark mysteries that lay dormant on this abandoned island. The Occultist looks to release on PlayStation 5, Xbox Series, and PC sometime in 2025. Number 19, Dark Pictures Anthology, Directive 8020. Supermassive's horror franchise returns with a new entry to the Dark Picture Anthology series by introducing a sci-fi survival horror game called Directive 8020. Set in a distant future and light years away from Earth, a crew of astronauts find themselves against an alien race that has the ability to mimic their prey in both appearance and personality. Because of this, the remaining survivors must quickly figure out who they can trust, who they can't trust, and make the right choices to save not only each other, but the entire population of Earth itself. According to the developers, Directive 8020 takes a lot of inspiration from iconic sci-fi horror movies like John Carpenter's The Thing and Ridley Scott's Alien. The Dark Pictures franchise has never been on par with the mainline narrative-focused horror games developed by Supermassive like Until Dawn and The Quarry, but this one does have a premise that intrigues me more than any other entry thus far. On top of that, based on early alpha footage, Directive 8020 appears to be heading in a different direction in terms of its gameplay. Unlike previous entries, there will be actual gameplay features this time around compared to just making choices and letting the story play out, which is what we saw with earlier entries of the Dark Pictures series. Regardless, one thing we could always count on when it comes to Supermassive is an original story that will probably blow us away, and branching narratives that'll make the experience different for each player based on the decisions that they make throughout the game. The Dark Pictures Anthology Directive 8020 releases on PlayStation 5, Xbox Series, and PC sometime in 2025. Number 18, Silent Hill Townfall.
I think you're here for some other reason. And I don't want to be anywhere near you when you figure that out.
It's been about 2 years since the last time that we saw a trailer for Silent Hill Townfall. Now, to be fair, Konami had other entries of the franchise to focus their marketing first and foremost on, like Silent Hill 2 Remake, The Short Message, and yes, even Silent Hill Ascension. God, that game was awful. But with all three of these games out of the way now, there's absolutely no reason why Konami can't start the marketing for the other games announced at the 2022 Silent Hill transmission. Now, we don't know much about Townfall, but here's what we do know. The game is being developed by No Code, and it's supposed to be the start of an anthology horror series similar to that of the Dark Pictures Anthology franchise. In fact, Supermassive at one point was Konami's first choice to develop this game before they moved on to a different developer, and Supermassive instead created the Dark Pictures Anthology series. which kind of tells us that there's a good chance that Townfall will be a narrative-focused survival horror game with branching storylines in which the player will have to make important choices to influence different endings. Outside of that though, we don't really know anything else. But considering the type of game that Townfall is rumored to be, I doubt it needs a long development cycle, and with that in mind, I wouldn't be too surprised to see it drop a new trailer at the beginning of 2025 with a release date later in the year. As of now though, Silent Hill Townfall hasn't officially been confirmed for 2025, and the only console that it's confirmed for is PlayStation 5. But looking at how Silent Hill 2 Remake released, I assume it'll be available on PC day one. Number 17, Paleophage. While it's definitely not the Dino Crisis remake that we have been wanting Capcom to give us, it is a dinosaur survival horror game that looks to scratch that itch while we continue waiting. Paleophage is a third-person over-the-shoulder indie survival horror game that pits the player against a city overrun with, you guessed it, dinosaurs. While the gameplay doesn't really stand up to bigger budget modern survival horror games, it does explore a genre that we have been dying to dive back into again. A good horror game that features dinosaurs. To be honest, I might be a little high on this game as one, I don't really know much about it other than the little bit of gameplay footage that we've seen on it, and two, the last time I got myself overly hyped for a dinosaur horror game, it totally flopped in the worst way possible. But what I can say is that I love dinosaurs and I want a horror game focused on them so badly. Sure, we have Jurassic Park Survival coming out in 2025 as well, but I don't really consider that a horror game to be honest, as it seems more like an action-adventure game. So hopefully Paleophage can give me what I want, and if not, there is one other dinosaur horror game that is releasing in 2025 that I still have hope for, but we'll talk about that later. Still, Paleophage is expected to release in 2025 at some point on PC. Number 16, Dying Light: The Beast. A bigger fan of the original Dying Light and the main protagonist Kyle Crane, I couldn't be happier to see his character returning for Dying Light: The Beast. I'll be the first to admit that Dying Light 2 was a major disappointment for me. For some reason, it didn't really interest me as much as the original game, and for some reason, it felt like it lacked the charm that the original game had. Dying Light: The Beast looks to capture the essence of that first game while also making the story and gameplay much more intense with more horror vibes to it. Now, to be fair, we really haven't seen much of this game yet, but my gut is telling me that this one is going to be as good or better than the original Dying Light. With the fan favorite Kyle Crane returning with new badass abilities in a new open world setting, Dying Light: The Beast is one of my most anticipated horror games of 2025. As of now, Dying Light: The Beast looks to release in the summer of 2025 on PC and all current gen and last gen consoles except Nintendo Switch. Number 15, Little Nightmares 3. Little Nightmares is a franchise that I've only recently explored, and honestly, I have really been missing out. The unique enemy types and the atmospheric core combined with a very interesting animation style makes both Little Nightmares and its sequel some of the coolest horror games out there. In fact, both games were so good that if Supermassive could deliver a great third installment to round off the trilogy, then Little Nightmares could be one of the better horror game trilogies out there. Still, I have my concerns, and those concerns are what stopped me from moving this entry higher on this list and above a similar game. See, the developers of Little Nightmares 1 and 2, Tormented Studios, hopefully I'm pronouncing that correctly, was bought out by Embracer Group. However, Bandai Namco, publishers of the first two games, retained that IP. Therefore, Tormented Studios no longer owns the IP for Little Nightmares, and for that reason, Bandai Namco hired Supermassive Games to develop the third installment of this fantastic franchise. And considering Supermassive's library, I gotta say I'm a little concerned about them being the ones to give us Little Nightmares 3. Hopefully, I'm worrying for nothing though, as I really want Little Nightmares 3 to be good. Little Nightmares 3 looks to release on all current gen and last gen consoles, including the Nintendo Switch, as well as PC sometime in 2025. Number 14, Routine. 13 is a sci-fi first-person indie horror game that honestly has been in development for as long as I can remember. Fortunately, it seems like the game has started to gain some traction, and it looks like that we might finally see it released sometime in 2025. The game centers around a lunar base in a distant future with 80s retro-like vibes to it. Think aesthetics like what we saw in Ridley Scott's Alien back in 1979. When the lunar base goes dark one day, the main protagonist must explore abandoned space malls and living quarters in order to find out what happened to everybody. There wasn't much gameplay shown off, but from what the developers have said and what we saw in the trailer, it seems to focus on stealth mechanics first with minimum ways to defend yourself. The trailer showcases two horrifying cyberpunk-like robots that attack the player, so it's fair to assume that the enemy types of the game will be these terrifying cyborgs. I'm actually really hyped for this game as it gives off Alien Isolation vibes with its aesthetics, stalker-like enemies that you're defenseless against, and an atmosphere that'll make you nervous as you go around every corner in this massive space station on the moon. Currently, Routine looks to release in 2025 at some point on Xbox Series X and Xbox One as well as PC. Number 13 by Sweet Carole. As a major fan of Remothered Tormented Fathers, I'm extremely excited for Chris Darrell's next project by Sweet Carole. While at first glance, this Disney animation-inspired game may look family-friendly, it's anything but. The creator of the game said that he was looking to create a fairy tale horror game that uses an animation style that reminds us of our favorite Disney movies growing up, but then turn that idea upside down by making it one of the most unique looking horror games out there. By Sweet Carole looks to be a side-scroller platformer, and the gameplay that we've seen of it introduces us to some pretty terrifying visuals despite the animation style. Just like his Remothered games, By Sweet Carole looks to be an alternate take on the stalker, run and hide horror games in which the player will need to flee versus fight. There's a lot of things going for this game. The unique style, the head designer created one of the best recent stealth-based horror games, and the premise of the story has me more intrigued than most horror games releasing in 2025. I can't wait to play this game, and I'm actually looking forward to playing it on my Switch specifically. By Sweet Carole looks to release in 2025 at some point on PC and all next-gen and last-gen consoles, including, as I just said, the Switch. Number 12, Deathground. As foreshadowed earlier on this list, Paleophage isn't the only dinosaur horror game releasing in 2025 that has my attention. In fact, Deathground is a survival horror game that I have been following since its initial announcement back in 2020. Since then, my hype for this game has only grown. Deathground looks to take a lot of inspiration from Alien Isolation as it pits the players against AI-controlled dinosaurs with minimum resources to help them escape. Hell, you even have a motion tracker that reminds me of the one seen in Alien Isolation. Unlike Alien Isolation though, Deathground will be a 3-player co-op experience that'll allow you to team up with your friends against these dinosaurs on multiple maps. Some of the sequences that we've seen look really good as the dinosaurs look absolutely terrifying. I'm actually really excited about this project as in my eyes, it'll probably be the best dinosaur horror game of the year. Deathground looks to release on PC sometime in 2025. Number 11, A.I.L.A. So I've known about this game for a while now, but until recently I thought it died. I wasn't too confident in this project, and there were a lot of discussions surrounding this game claiming that it was promising a lot of things that it wasn't going to deliver on, and it was being compared to the day before in that regard. But then out of nowhere, a gameplay trailer dropped and I'm once again hyped for this game. Now, full disclosure, this game could still come out and absolutely fail to deliver, but until proven otherwise, I'm still going to root for it. As for the game itself, the developers seem very ambitious about this project as the gameplay footage and trailers seem to be combining a lot of the best elements of survival horror games. For one, the monster designs appear to be top notch. I mean, if these visuals are as impressive as they look in the trailers, some of these monsters look absolutely horrifying. The developers promise an immersive story, mind-blowing body horror and limb dismemberment features, and an interactive world that'll require strategy and weapon crafting to fully explore and complete everything A.I.L.A has to offer. Again, it's a very ambitious indie horror game, and it's something that could very well be one of the best indie horror games of all time if it manages to deliver on everything it's promising. A.I.L.A currently doesn't have a release date, but based on the recent gameplay footage drop, it seems to be hinting at a 2025 release date on PC. Number 10, Reanimal. Reanimal is a new survival horror IP developed by the same team that brought us Little Nightmares 1 and 2. In fact, I'm sure you could tell just from the animation style and the dark environment seen in the trailer, but Reanimal looks to be the spiritual successor to the Little Nightmares franchise. Anyways, I won't repeat myself too much as I said this when talking about Little Nightmares 3, but the studio essentially lost the rights to that franchise and will instead be developing Reanimal. For that reason, I'm more confident in this game than I am in Little Nightmares 3. Plus, if we're just comparing the trailers, Reanimal actually has me hooked more than Little Nightmares 3 does. Some of the monster designs and areas just look way more impressive to me at first glance. It'll be interesting to see which one of these games delivers a better experience, but based on the track record of Tarsier Studios and the gameplay footage on both games, my money is on Reanimal. Reanimal looks to release in 2025 on PC, PlayStation 5, and Xbox Series X. Number 9, Corpse Party 2 Darkness Distortion. As a major fan of the Corpse Party franchise, and as someone that was extremely sad when Dead Patient kept getting delayed, I can't be more happy that Corpse Party is getting another game. I won't dive into the details of the Corpse Party franchise as a whole, as it gets a bit confusing with the entries of the series. Long story short though, there's a bunch of spin-offs, and there was even a Corpse Party 2 already released partially called Dead Patient, but they never got around to finishing it. And technically speaking, that game's still not canceled, they're still going to do that game, which is a little bit confusing. Anyways, Darkness Distortion looks to be the real sequel, and it will hopefully deliver a more horrifying story than the original. Looking at the gameplay footage that we've seen on this game already, Darkness Distortion looks to take the franchise in a different direction. Instead of the visual novel style cutscenes, we get more animated cutscenes with the characters. The gameplay also seems to combine elements of both first person and third person. Finally, Corpse Party 2 will be set in a hospital similar to Dead Patient. I don't know if that means that they'll connect the two stories, but I feel like they would considering both games are set in a hospital, and that can't just be a coincidence. Also, the main character of Dead Patient was named Ayami, and ironically, it seems like Ayami is also the name of the spirit that is part of the ritual that the three main characters of Darkness Distortion actually perform. So that is another strange coincidence, which tells me that somehow they're going to link these two games. How? I'm not completely sure yet. Corpse Party 2 looks to release in 2025 on PlayStation 4, Nintendo Switch, and PC. Number 8, The Sinking City 2. If you're someone that appreciates H.P. Lovecraft, then The Sinking City 2 should be a game that's on your radar for 2025. The original game took inspiration from multiple H.P. Lovecraft stories to create one of the better horror games set in his universe. And with how successful the original game was, it wasn't too shocking to see a sequel get announced. We don't really know much about The Sinking City 2, but based on what we saw in the original game, we can expect a lot of things. A very interesting and narrative-driven horror story set in the universe of H.P. Lovecraft, an adventure game with a deep mystery and multiple twists while also including RPG elements, and a relatively smooth combat system that is easy to maneuver. Overall, The Sinking City 2 may not be the scariest game releasing in 2025, but thanks to the horror elements from Lovecraft's stories, it does have a lot of potential to build up on an already massive and immersive world filled with unique monsters and creatures introduced to us in the first game. The Sinking City 2 looks to release in 2025 on PlayStation 5, Xbox Series X, and PC. Number 7, Cronos The New Dawn. After the big win for Bloober Team's Silent Hill 2 remake, everybody wants to know what they have in store next. And while there hasn't been any word on Konami getting Bloober Team to develop another Silent Hill remake, there are a couple of new IPs that Bloober Team has cooking for us. One of which is the sci-fi horror game Cronos The New Dawn. Now, we've only recently been introduced to this game in the form of a cinematic trailer with very little gameplay, but there are definitely some intriguing traits about Bloober Team's next big project. The trailer of the game gives off Dead Space meets Returnal vibes, and the body horror looks to be on par with Silent Hill 2 Remake. Again, we didn't get a lot of gameplay footage, but if Bloober Team can take what they develop in Silent Hill 2 Remake and feature it in this new sci-fi horror game, then we could potentially see them give Dead Space Remake a run for its money. Also, fun fact, Bloober Team is apparently looking to release their Nintendo Switch exclusive survival horror game, working title Project M, at some point in 2025 as well, but nothing has been revealed or even confirmed on the game outside of the working title. Either way, Cronos The New Dawn looks to release in 2025 on PlayStation 5, Xbox Series X, and PC. Number 6, A.I.L.A. The more I see on A.I.L.A, the more hype I get about this game. If you asked me about my most anticipated horror games of 2025 about a week ago, I'm not sure if this game would have broken my top 20. But we've seen about 3 trailers on this game now, and each time I see it, I get more hyped about it. Anyway, A.I.L.A is a first-person horror game that puts you into the shoes of a game tester that gets chosen as the only person to test out A.I.L.A in an interactive VR experience. A.I.L.A can reach into your deepest and darkest fears and then use it to create some of the most horrifying experiences possible. Because it's basically a simulation that keeps adapting to the main character's fears, you'll find yourself thrown into different environments as the game travels back and forth between horror subgenres. Psychological horror, action horror, survival horror, you name it. A.I.L.A will put you through all of these subgenres and appears to challenge you in a way that you've never been challenged before. You'll be thrown into all sorts of environments as the line between reality and fiction begin to blur in this exciting new horror game. Seriously, this game could really surprise a lot of people if it delivers on everything it's promising. A.I.L.A looks to release on PC sometime in 2025. Number 5, Tormented Souls 2. One of my favorite indie survival horror games of all time is Tormented Souls. The game was phenomenal as it had everything a fan of classic survival horror could possibly want. Unique puzzles, terrifying monster designs, fixed camera angles, and a great atmospheric horror setting. So obviously, I'm really excited about the sequel that was announced late last year at Gamescom. Now originally, Tormented Souls 2 was planned for this year, but ultimately it was delayed into 2025. And as of now, we've only seen 2 short trailers and 23 minutes of gameplay with no combat. So I'm trying not to get too excited about Tormented Souls 2. Still, even from what I've seen of it, it seems to be everything I could possibly want from a sequel. Sure, we haven't seen any combat yet, but to be honest with you, the combat wasn't really great in the first game to begin with, and it's definitely not a feature that's important to a game like Tormented Souls 2. The real thrill of Tormented Souls 2 comes from the nostalgia of old school survival horror games combined with modern visuals and puzzle solving, and that Tormented Souls 2 looks to have nailed perfectly like they did with the original game. And with the game being developed on Unreal Engine 5 this time instead of Unity Engine, I'm willing to bet that Tormented Souls 2 is going to look much better and play much better than the original game. Tormented Souls 2 looks to release on PC, PlayStation 5, and Xbox Series X sometime in 2025. Number 4, Doom: The Dark Ages. I went back and forth about including Doom: The Dark Ages on this list due to me believing that Doom isn't a horror franchise. However, I let other creators, viewers, and friends of mine talk me into believing that Doom is, at the very least, an action horror franchise as much as Resident Evil 4 and Resident Evil 5 is. So, with that debate out of the way, obviously I'm excited for Doom: The Dark Ages. I mean, who wouldn't be? Doom has nailed the last 2 games of this rebooted franchise and are now 2 for 2. And there's little to no doubt at all that The Dark Ages will impress us once again. I won't dive too much into why I'm excited about this game because it's pretty self-explanatory. It's Doom. I get to run around all over hell on Earth, use tons of weapons, and kill demons around every corner, all while listening to the most hyped soundtrack ever. How the hell do I not get excited about a franchise like Doom? I can't wait to find out what crazy new weapons the Dark Ages brings into the mix, because that's one thing that Doom never disappoints us on. Doom the Dark Ages surprisingly looks to release on PlayStation 5, Xbox Series X, and PC sometime in 2025. Number 3, Post Trauma.
Hello? Where is this?
Funny enough, these next two games were my top 5 most anticipated horror games of 2024, which obviously means both of them were delayed into 2025. The first being Post Trauma. This is an old school survival horror game with modern graphics that appears to take a lot of inspiration from classic Silent Hill games. Between the puzzles I came across in the demo, the unique monster designs, the tank controls and camera angles that remind us of classic Silent Hill, an unnerving soundtrack that reminds me of Silent Hill music, and a beautiful yet terrifying atmosphere set underground inside of a subway but within some sort of nightmarish-like reality. Wow, that was a mouthful. Post Trauma has a lot of potential to rival other modern takes on old school survival horror games like Tormented Souls. Even this story has me intrigued with a conductor that is facing some sort of traumatic past. Again, this screams old school Silent Hill and I'm all about it. Post Trauma looks to release on PlayStation 5, Xbox Series X, and PC sometime in 2025. Number 2, Echoes of the Living. My most anticipated indie horror game of 2024 returns once again for this list, as it looks to be getting delayed until 2025 now. What interests me the most about this game is the fact that it's a love letter to Resident Evil 2 fans, as everything about this game takes inspiration from my favorite video game of all time. This indie horror game takes place in a small town in Europe, sound familiar? In which there is a zombie outbreak and 2 main characters, again, sound familiar? Named Laura and Liam, who must battle through hordes of zombies and monsters in order to find their loved ones and escape this citywide outbreak. I'm not even gonna say it again. From tank controls, fixed camera angles, puzzles, and unique locations throughout this town, Echoes of the Living looks to be a classic Resident Evil game, but with modern graphics. Think Resident Evil 2 remake with that fixed camera mod that we got a little while back. Considering that this game is being developed by a husband and wife team, has 12 hours of gameplay, and hits all of the key elements that you could possibly want from an old school survival horror game, Echoes of the Living is a game developed by hardcore Resident Evil fans that was made for hardcore Resident Evil fans. Echoes of the Living looks to release on PC sometime in 2025. Number 1, Silent Hill F. I can't believe I'm about to say this, but I'm gonna go back-to-back years with Silent Hill games as my most anticipated horror game of the year. Yeah, that's right, Silent Hill F is my most anticipated horror game of 2025, assuming it does release next year. To be honest, Silent Hill 2 deserves a lot of credit for this. While it was my most anticipated horror game this year, I gotta say, as time went on, I grew more and more concerned about this game. Thankfully, I was completely wrong about Silent Hill 2 Remake, and it might have been my most awful hot takes throughout the year. So, now that we've seen what Konami could do and that they could deliver a good Silent Hill game, my hype level for their next big release is through the roof. While it's very likely that Silent Hill Townfall will release before Silent Hill F, Townfall isn't a mainline entry according to Konami. Silent Hill F will be the first ever mainline entry in years. On that note though, Silent Hill F looks to take a completely different approach on this game than previous entries. First off, it doesn't appear to take place in Silent Hill. Sure, other games have done that as well, like Silent Hill 4 The Room, and more recently, The Short Message. But this time, we are heading to a completely different place and time that is yet to be explored in a Silent Hill game. Rural Japan in the 1950s. Just from the short cinematic trailer that we saw back in 2022, Silent Hill F looks to explore unique imagery and visuals never before seen in the Silent Hill franchise. Then when you combine that with the lead writer like Ryukishi07, the creator of the visual novel series When They Cry, then we could assume that Silent Hill F will have a very intense and impactful story to go along with the impressive visuals. The only downsides is that 1, Bloober Team isn't behind this game like they were with Silent Hill 2 Remake, and 2, the devs behind this game has a mixed history with games in the past. While they worked on great games like Resident Evil 2 and Resident Evil 7, they have also worked on some awful games like Marvel's Avengers and RE-verse. Still, with the success of Silent Hill 2, I'm willing to give Konami the benefit of the doubt and allow myself to once again be hyped for another Silent Hill game. Anyway, Silent Hill F has a similar situation as Silent Hill Townfall in terms of a release date and platforms. Currently, nothing is confirmed, but with how long it's been since it was announced and how high the hype level is right now for Silent Hill, my money is on late 2025. Yes, I believe it's going to be the year of Silent Hill. As for consoles, well, if we're going to continue the trend of recent Silent Hill games, then I would expect it to release exclusively on PlayStation 5, with a possibility of a PC day one release as well. But that does it for this episode of Nerd Space Games. Hit up the comments and let me know what you think of my list. Is Silent Hill F, if it releases next year, your most anticipated horror game of 2025? Or is there a different upcoming horror game that claims that title for you? Let me know down below. Also, don't forget to drop the name of any other horror games that didn't crack my top 20. There's a ton of great looking horror games releasing next year like Ground Zero and Heartworm that didn't make my list. So be sure to shine some light on as many horror games as possible in the comments down below. Someone will probably appreciate it, trust me. Anyway, if you haven't already, be sure to subscribe to my channel for more survival horror content. Also, leave a like on today's video if you enjoyed today's topic. But thanks for watching, and as always, I'll catch you guys on the next episode of Nerd Space Games. Take care.